What's April?
It's April 1st today.
Oh, okay. Because my birthday is in April. I thought, how did you
No,
get
April
that?
1st. Today is April 1st, 2024. We're here to interview Marietta Lubelski, who is a survivor of the Holocaust. The interviewer is Esther Amber, and the videographer is Robert Wilson. We're doing this interview under the auspices of the USC Shoah Foundation. The interview will be in English. First of all, thank you very much for agreeing to doing this. I'm really excited. My first question is if you could tell me your name, your maiden name, and your married name, and spell the last names.
It's Marietta Haas Lubelski, Lubelsky.
How about Haas?
Oh, Haas.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in Budapest, Hungary, 1937, April 3rd.
You're coming up to your birthday in 2 days.
Yeah, day after tomorrow.
So happy birthday.
Thank you.
So first we're going to talk about your grandparents. So I would like to ask you your memories of your paternal grandparents, starting with their names. Where
Maternal
they're from.
or paternal?
Paternal. Let's start with your father's parents.
Okay.
What were their names and where did they live?
His name, well, shall I say it in English or in Hungarian?
As you wish.
It was Jakob Haas, H-A-S. His wife was Hedwig Haas.
Do you know her maiden name by any chance?
Yeah, Lustig.
Lustig, okay. Where did they live?
In Budapest.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of job did your grandfather have?
My grandfather had, I don't know it in English,
Say it in Hungarian.
but I don't know it in Hungarian either. So doesn't exist these days. It's people went drinking. There was music.
Like a tavern?
Like a kochma. Kochma.
Last time we spoke, you said it was like a csárda, which is more like a tavern, and kochma is more
Yeah,
like
it was a csárda, but I don't know the difference between a kochma and a csárda.
Csárda, you have food. You have food. In a csárda, you have food. You often have music. A kochma is more drinking.
Which one has more music?
Csárda.
Then this was not a csárda. This was a kochma.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you know where it was in Budapest?
Yes, it was. Oh God, I don't remember the name of the street, but it was.
Which part of Budapest?
Right near József Körút. Everything was where the Corvin house,
Okay.
Corvin Morsey was.
Do you know how religious they were?
How what?
How religious they were.
Not religious at all. Nobody was religious in my family.
How many children did they have?
There are two. My father and his brother.
So what could you tell me, because we're going to talk about your father later, what can you tell me about his brother?
His brother?
Mm-hmm.
His brother was very different from my father. I loved him. I really did. He was a ladies' man. He loved women. And I think he was very good looking, by the way. And whenever he had a chance, he got hold of women. He loved to dance. He liked to go to amuse himself, and that's what he was doing. And what is interesting is that he came home after the war, and he was in Bor during the war. And he came home after the war and it met this very nice lady. Turned out to be ultra Orthodox. And her husband died during the war. And I know she had to get brother's, her husband's brother's permission to marry him. And anyway, they kept a real kosher home, but she was, even though, and she knew that I don't keep anything, she said, do whatever you want, whatever makes you happy. And they came to Montreal when we got married in a Reformed temple. She said, fine. Like, she accepted everybody. She didn't try to convert me. She didn't try to do anything. She just accepted all of us as we were. So this was a great, I loved her.
Did that was your uncle, did he become religious because he married an Orthodox woman?
He never became religious. He just followed whatever she did.
What was his name?
István Pista.
Okay. I think you mentioned that your grandfather had a second wife as well.
My grandfather? No. My great-grandfather. My grandfather never had a second wife.
He just had one wife. Yeah, okay.
What's going on?
So your paternal grandfather did have a second wife, right?
Yes, I thought of my maternal I never met my paternal grandfather, so I just know the stories.
Yeah, but I'm interested in stories as well. So he did have a second wife. So what happened to the first wife?
Died. And this is what we were trying to figure out when she died. She died before my father went to university, so it must have been 1918, 1919, something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so Marietta, we're going to go back a little bit because we changed the scenery. If you could tell me your married name and your maiden name.
It's Marietta Haas Lubelski.
Okay. So we're going to kind of repeat a little bit about the grandparents, paternal grandparents. Could you tell me their names? Your paternal...
My paternal grandparents. Yes. My paternal grandfather's name was Jakob Haas, and my grandmother's name was Hedwig Haas. Maiden name was Lustig.
Where did they live?
In Budapest.
In Budapest. What kind of occupation your grandfather had?
He had a
kochma.
A kochma.
So kind of like a drinking place.
Because that's like a word for me that I don't know. It's a kochma.
And whereabouts in the city?
Right behind József Kút. József Kút was this way, and you turned here, that little street, which led... I don't know. I think it's what Corvin there.
Yeah, Corvin there was a building there with the
that's
movie
exactly
theater.
what I'm talking about. Yeah. It was
okay. And you mentioned that he had a first wife and then he remarried. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Okay, he was married originally to Hedwig, and they had 2 children. Pista and Sándor, my father, and she died, I think in 2019, 2018, I'm really not sure. And my grandfather...
And your grandfather?
My grandfather remarried within 1 year. My father was very upset, then he moved out of the house and he went to Berlin to university.
And you told me a little bit about your uncle, Pista. Okay. I'm sorry you have to repeat, but if you could.
Okay, well, what was Pista like? Pista was very different from my father as far as I know, since it's difficult to tell me how my father was because I was 3 years old when he left. So... But I don't think he was a womanizer. My mother would have killed him. So, anyway, my uncle loved women, and he loved to drink and loved to amuse himself. And he worked for my grandfather in the movie theater.
Oh, your other grandfather.
Yeah, my maternal grandfather. And at the photograph, that's where he worked. So he made some money. Most of the time, he lived with us. And that's about it. I mean, oh yeah. And then he was, during the war, he spent in Boer, which was a labor camp.
It was
And,
mines, yeah. One of the
and
worst.
he returned in 1945 with a lot of food, which I remember, and including sardines. I got very sick because I ate 6 cans of them. So sardines and I do not get along these days.
How did he return from a forced labor camp with
The
sardines?
Russians, when the Russians walked in, they just gave it to everybody, whatever food there was. And this is very similar to what happened to us in 1945 when we crossed the road to the Germans, to the Russian side.
Did he get married after the war, Pista?
Yes, he got married in 1946. And we were very surprised when we found out about Bori because she was very pretty, I still remember her when she walked in. She was very little with a beautiful white hat on. And then, I don't know, Pishta said, she's religious. I said, what do you mean she's religious? Like, what are you talking about? And I didn't say that, but there was, anyway, he got married to her, and she was religious, but she accepted the Haas family's idiosyncrasies about no religion. She just said, you do whatever you want to do, and I do whatever I want to do. My uncle never, I don't think my uncle became religious. He just followed the rules. Because I remember going outside with him with the first cigarette on a Friday night. Well, that wasn't exactly supposed to be done. But she accepted that too. This is the way she was. The only person, they had one son, John, who was very sick, who was sick. He had schizophrenia, and was very difficult to bring him up. But finally, he decided that he was going to go. They lived in Montreal, by the way. And they finally he decided that he wants to get away. So went to Toronto by himself. But the mother boy decided he cannot be left alone in Toronto, so they all moved to Toronto. And I used to go about once a month to Toronto to visit them. What's wrong?
What's she doing?
What's wrong?
Yes.
We went completely off subject now. Where was I?
No, you weren't off subject at all. Now we're gonna go on to your maternal grandparents that you knew. What were they called?
My maternal grandparents, okay. My grandfather was called Joseph Bogner.
József, right? In Hungarian.
The other one was my grandfather too. But I knew my mother's grandfather. We lived together, so I knew him very well. And the videos start playing now.
And the grandmother, your grandmother was called? Your grandmother's name?
Paula.
Paula? Who?
Paula. Oh, maiden name? Klein.
Klein. So they also lived in Budapest, right?
No, my grandfather was born in Budapest. My grandmother was born in Egres, which I believe is Slovakia right now. And this is why she used to, after the war, she was able to speak to the Russians because she could speak Slovak. And we could always calm down all the Russian soldiers.
How did she end up in Budapest from Egres, your grandmother?
My grandmother went to a visit to Budapest. And she met my grandfather. I really don't know how they met. And I suppose it was a love story. And she went back to Egres. She said, I'm going to marry him. And apparently my great-grandparents said, I don't think so, because my grandfather came from an underprivileged family. I don't think they even knew what religion was. And they were very upset, being very orthodox, my grandmother's parents. And they said no, and my grandmother said yes. And they said no, and apparently this was going on for quite a while. And finally my grandmother said, fine, I'm leaving to Budapest. With or without your permission.
So did they give the permission in the end?
What?
Did they give the permission in the end? Do you know?
At the end, they did hold the wedding in Egres. I don't think they ever gave Rudy the permission. Because I never heard my grandmother say that they went to visit them or anything. I don't think he was really accepted.
What do you know about her family? Because you have some information about your grandmother's family back in Egres.
Yes. They had a farm, big farm, chickens and cows, no pigs. And all kinds of other animals and grain and whatever else grows on the farm. And my grandfather worked with the staff, I suppose. He did the same thing, and the only thing that I know that I thought was very funny is that he used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go and greet the workers, and they used to drink slivovitz together in the morning at 4 o'clock. That was kind of difficult for me to understand, the 4 o'clock in the morning getting up and the slivovitz.
That's your great-grandfather, your grandmother's father.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And by the way, he lived to the age of 80, either 89 or 91. And he died with his own teeth, his own hair, with all the slivovitz and everything else.
He died a natural death, or he died in the war?
No, he died natural death. So did my great-grandmother, but my great-grandmother died about 30 years earlier.
Did they have a lot of children, being Orthodox?
Yes, they had. Altogether, my grandfather was widowed. My great-grandfather was widowed, and my great-grandmother was widowed. They each had 3 children from the previous marriages. They got married, then became 6. And then together they had 5 more. So altogether there were 11.
So your grandmother moved to Budapest?
Yes.
To your grandfather. So tell me about your grandfather. You said he was from Budapest. What was his original, what did he train?
Well, because somehow, whether he really studied it, I don't think there were any schools for electricians at the time, but he became an electrician. He always knew what to do with electricity. And got tired of that. And he sort of got fascinated when movies came in, and that was around 1907, 1908.
Or even earlier. Actually, yeah.
And he liked those movies, so he decided he was going to get movies, and he's going to go from city to city and from village to village to show movies. And then my grandmother got pregnant and had my mother, and he said, that's not a good idea. I want to see the child. I want to be with the family. So he opened the Angyal. That was the movie called.
The movie theater?
Yeah, movie theater. It's a movie theater. On Körút, on József Körút. I can see the house in front of me but there was no movie. I think there was a store of some sort. But don't forget, there was a war in between. There was all kinds of things that happened. And he then he bought the photograph together with this other family who actually protected us during the war.
I looked into the photograph actually, and what I found was that the owners in the 20s or 30s, I think, were Klein brothers. So
What?
Klein brothers, like two Kleins, two men who were something Klein. So I was wondering if they had anything to do with your grandmother.
You know, it's very, and I tried to find them because they all left, all five. Five? No, six. There were six of them. Sorry, 6 and 5. 6. They all left to the States. There was no email at the time. There was no faxes. They just disappeared. We don't know. Nobody knows what happened to them. The only thing my great aunt in Philadelphia, who was my grandmother's sister, told us that they went to Chicago. How she found out, I tried to trace it to Chicago, and I couldn't.
So he had first the Angyal movie theater, then he bought the Bodograph.
What?
So your grandfather first had the Angyal movie theater, then he bought the Bodograph.
Yes.
That was his second movie theater.
Yes, and that's the one he had until it was nationalized in 1948.
48?
Yeah. And of course, in between, the Nazis also took it away.
You actually mentioned that you have a memory of this being nationalized. Can you tell me about that?
Very good memory.
Yeah, tell me about that.
But which one?
The nationalization by the communists.
By the communists or the Nazis? Because I have both very good memory.
Wow. Tell both then.
Okay. By that time in 1944, I was older, and I suppose maybe with a good memory or a good observation. I still have very good observation, by the way, and good perception. And I remember my mother coming home, and she was so upset because it was the nursemaid who was taking care of me as a child who reported it, that Bogner still owns the Photograph. So that's the way the Nazis, and she was so upset because it was somebody she knew, she liked, and that's the person that actually reported it.
So what happened exactly?
They took it away. I mean, they just, that's it. My grandfather was out, everybody was out.
But you said that he had that movie theater with someone who was non-Jewish.
That's right. The other half was non-Jewish. He had the other half. And actually what he did, he kept, I think my grandfather got the money back that he made during the war.
So they basically gave it to him, to the other one.
That,
what happened to the Angyal? What, did he still have it during the war?
which one?
The Angyal, the first one, the very first one. You said that the first movie theater he bought was the Angyal movie theater?
Yes.
Did he have that?
No.
No, he didn't. Okay. And then how did...
But after then, no. Sorry, the second movie theater was the Andrassy. I'm skipping here.
So first was Angyal.
Andrassy, Bodograph, Tatra.
So when did he get the Bodograph back, your grandfather?
After the war.
And then what happened? How was it nationalized the second time?
The second time was national in 48. And I remember my mother coming home very late with enough stuff to, well, she took as much as possible out of the place, especially the money and whatever was valuable. And she came home with it, and that was the end. They just took it. But because everybody knew my grandfather, everybody in the business, people knew my grandfather, he was warned ahead of time in the morning that the communists are coming, or the they're coming at night. Be prepared. Which was helpful.
You mentioned something about you remembering taking stuff out yourself, helping. You said that you were helping them to move stuff out of the movie theater.
That was the Andrassy. That was right after the war.
Oh, so tell me about that.
Okay. Andrassy was nationalized May the 1st, 1945. Remember we had a discussion about that? He was, and because the government said they needed it for a prison. That was the famous prison in Hungary. But you told me it was Andrassy Ötvenkilenc.
Hot one, 60.
Hot one. And then the Andrassy was Ötvenkilenc. Okay? Am I making myself sort of...
Yeah.
And that's when I remembered all the furniture. My cousin who lived in Brazil, I mean, everybody, my uncle, my father's brother, everybody was moving furniture. And that's the furniture that was used and the equipment that was used when grandfather opened the Tatra.
When did he do that?
In 46, 45, 46.
Mm-hmm. And do you know where the Tatra was?
Yeah. Ülőjött 63. Did one know the phone number?
I'm asking because there were two Tatra buses. There was one in Újpest as well.
Where?
Újpest. There was one open in Újpest.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't either. I just looked up. I was just doing some research. Where did they live, your grandparents?
On Pratovica.
Did they own their own
Yeah,
building?
they owned the building.
So tell me about that building a little bit.
Yeah, they owned the building. And they lived in the building. I mean, they had tenants. It was a small house. It wasn't a big house. It was a little house.
How many floors and how many apartments?
If I remember correctly, it was 3.
And how many apartments, do you think?
Do you think I counted it? No, I don't have any idea.
And where did they live? Which floor? Which part?
Second
of the house?
floor.
Second floor. Do you remember their apartment?
Yes, I do.
So describe their apartment as much as you can.
As much as I can. They were mainly what we call antiques today. My grandmother loved, and she liked silver. So everything was either silver or wood. And my grandmother liked very dark wood. My mother liked oak. So my mother's furniture was oak and my grandmother's furniture was dark. Now, what kind of wood it was, I don't have any idea.
How many rooms did they have?
They had the bedroom. They had a living room, a dining room, a maid's room off the kitchen, and an entranceway, but the entranceway was big. Like they had another table in the entranceway, so did my parents. And that's the one that was used if somebody just dropped in for coffee or tea. And the dining room was used for dinner or whatever, lunch, or holidays or whatever. But they also used their dining room every night.
Did they entertain a lot?
Always. My grandma...
What is this?
I don't know. My grandmother's house was always open.
Who were their guests? What was their social circle?
And my grandfather's family was quite large. My grandfather's brother married a Catholic lady. My God, I haven't talked about that for so long. And she's the one who used to bring us food during the war, during the occupation by the Germans. And they had, how many children? One, two. Two children. Yeah, two. If I remember correctly. I only remember two. And they were always coming and going. They had children and they had parents and whatever. They were all there. They were not Jewish. They weren't deported or anything. So they just entered. They just came, and somebody always came. And I always remember that my grandfather's sister always came. You never asked me how many brothers or sisters my grandfather had.
How many?
I just remembered now. Okay, now I have to count. One of them died, but not during the war. He fell off the train. He was an alcoholic. So that was that. And there was Jula. And there was Itzu. 4.
4.
And
And did they have other friends apart from family that would come regularly?
of course they did. But they were all in the entertainment. Not so much my grandparents, actually my parents.
How religious were your maternal grandparents?
I beg your pardon?
How religious were your maternal grandparents?
They weren't.
Not at all.
Or certainly my grandfather wasn't. My grandmother, sort of.
Which means what?
She tried. But it was hard because my mother didn't want to have anything to do with it. And my grandfather didn't have anything to do with it. So she decided she's not going to eat pork. And that's it. That was as far as she went.
And they only had the one child, right? Your
Yes,
mother.
Elsa, yes.
Yeah. So let's move on to your father. What was his name?
Has. Alexander or Shandor, which one do you want?
Shandor. He never came here. So.
Yeah.
When was he born? What year?
1901, November the 18th.
And do you know what kind of education he had? You do. So tell me what kind of education he had.
He had the normal gymnasium or high school or whatever it's called. And he had this commerce agricultural degree. I don't know what it is, but it was a combination of the two. Because let's not forget that Hungary was an agricultural country. And my father, I suppose, was interested not so much in the agriculture part, but in the commercial part. So there was this degree offered at the University of Berlin, which combined the two.
Why did he have to go to university in Berlin and not in Hungary?
To get out of, because of the Anschluss. Was that called Anschluss?
The Anschluss is in 38.
What?
The Anschluss was in 1938 when Germany
No,
occupied
okay, that's
Austria.
not called the Anschluss. There was a
Numerus
quota
clausus.
system.
The numerus clausus you're thinking
That's
of.
the one, you see.
And do you know what kind of work he did before, like when he came back?
No, he was in high school.
No, when he came back from university.
Started working for my grandfather.
Okay. Remember not to touch your mic.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. How did you meet your mother? Your father, how did they meet, your parents?
I think one of the society's ball. You know, they used to have these balls.
Which societies?
What?
Which societies? Which societies? What society?
I suppose the entertainment society. I never asked, but I know they met somehow with the ball, something to do with some ball. I never went into detail. And my mother wasn't willing to sort of talk about it so much.
Do you know why he wouldn't talk about it?
She was very upset, of course, when my father left. She was very upset when my father died. Apparently it was a real love marriage. And I think she felt she has to go on. And as a matter of fact, she told me many times that she felt that her responsibility was I right now.
What happened to your father during the war?
My father was conscripted into the army. As a matter of fact, my last memory of my father, I was 3 years old. I mean, not a clear memory, but it's a memory. He was in his army uniform. And then when they got to the train station, they were divided, Jews and Christians. Now, there is a story to that. My mother, through her connection, his connection, somebody's connection, was able to get to the train station where my father was leaving. Now, the person who was responsible for beating the Jews actually had a trial after the war. My mother went to the trial, and of course he denied everything. And then my mother got up and she said, "You beat," because he said, "Didn't touch her." "Yes, you did." And you know what he said, the person? He said, "That's impossible. Nobody was there at the station. No, you couldn't know that." That was the end of it because he admitted it, right? And he got hung.
So
My mother hung him.
when they were dividing the Jews and the non-Jews at the station, what happened?
That's when they started beating them. And that's what my mother saw. And that's what she testified after the war.
Where was your father taken?
What?
Where was your father taken?
Well, this was a big discussion. He died in Voronezh. Now, how he went there, nobody knows.
Did he ever come home? Because when they took them to forced labor battalions,
Yes,
they
he
would
did.
come home.
He did once in a while. He came home because he was, oh my God, what's the name of it? There was this camp right outside, and where that big factory was, which made
what?
my cousin was the president there. You kill me.
Whereabout was it?
It was a steel factory, the biggest steel factory.
Chapel?
What?
Chapel?
Chapel, thank you! There was a concentration camp out there, and that's where my father was. Near Chapel. And my cousin, after the war, was the president of Chapel.
So the last time you saw your father, though, was 1940, and then you didn't see him again, even though he might have come home. And then what happened to him in Voronezh?
Nobody really knows. Because there are two theories. One, that he went to sleep at night and he never woke up. The other one is that he ended up in the hospital, and as the Germans were retreating, they burned the hospital.
Who told this story? Like, who were the people who
There
told
were
it?
5 people who came back from that particular unit. Now, this is where it becomes difficult. And they are the ones who told. And that was the only people, and there were hundreds of them. There were only 5 people who came back. That unit was probably the most devastated one where my father was.
How did your mother, and where did your mother learn about the death of her husband?
She got a notice in January, because I've got the notice here. So I have this is something that is documented. And she got a notice in January that my father died.
January which year?
What?
January which year?
43. And my mother said that's impossible because she just got a postcard from him. Okay, that's where she said, well, he's alive. Wherever he is, he's alive. Never any more postcards. And in 45, one of the 5 people who survived came back and told my mother. So my mother, up till now, was positive he's alive. Does that make
Yeah, it makes sense. What was your mother's name? Your mother's maiden name?
Bogner.
And her first name?
Bogner.
And her first name?
Elsa.
Elsa. And when was she born?
1910, June the 12th.
1910. Do you know what kind of education she had?
Yeah, she finished the so-called gymnasium. I don't know what it is in English. And then she was supposed, that was in 1929, and she was supposed to go to a finishing school in Switzerland. But then 1929 came and everybody lost everything.
What year did she marry your father?
33.
33. And you mentioned that your father came and worked for your grandfather, right? So what
Well, he was doing the business part.
Which means what exactly?
You think I know?
Yes, I think you know. You could.
He did the business aspect of it, like, I suppose, I really don't know. I never asked.
But you mentioned something about him going to the States.
Oh, that's another story. My parents were in Germany in 1935. And if my history serves me right, Hitler was already on the rise at that time. And my mother said to my father in Germany, in Berlin, she said, we better get out of here. I don't like this. My father said, in Hungary, this could never happen. Famous last words. Well, we found out otherwise, right? But my mother, by 1938, my mother finally persuaded my father, it's not a good idea to stay here. Let's do something. So my father applied for a visa to go to the States. He had some money with him, but very little. I don't know how that worked. But he was supposed to go, and this is what he wanted to do. He wanted to open a movie theater in New York. His boat was supposed to leave on September the 15th, and we all know what happened in 1939, September the 1st.
What were they doing in Germany in 1935, your parents?
My father wanted to show my mother where she went to university, where he lived, down memory lane.
So it was just like some trip to go to
A
Germany.
trip, that's all. No, they weren't doing anything.
Your mother, did she? You said that she also helped in your grandfather's business.
Yes, she did. Oh,
What
yes.
did she do?
My mother, whatever was needed to be done, she was always asked to do it. Whether it was taking tickets or sitting at the
buffet counter?
No. At the Casa. What's a Casa?
Oh, the cash.
Cash. This is crazy. I told you, I think, in Hungarian.
Of course.
She was, or she did that, or she supervised what, the people there, they used to.
Gate pace.
That's the word I
no
was.
idea in English.
Yeah, the gate pace were and if somebody didn't come, she did it. So she was the spare.
Do you have any siblings?
No.
No. So you're born in 1937. Where are your parents living at this point? Once they got married, where did they live?
Oh, God, I have the address, but I forgot. I don't remember. Because I never lived there. I only was there for 3 months. And I don't remember what happened when I was 3 months. I think Erzsébet there.
That exists, yeah.
Was there such a place?
Yeah.
Okay, then it was Erzsébet there. That's where they lived. And then they moved to Üllőút.
Can you describe that apartment where they lived? Because you also lived there.
Which one? On Erzsébet?
The one on Üllőút.
Oh, I thought that she would know. Yes, I can describe it. That was my room, which was all blue with Herrendy fixtures in it. And beautiful curtains, and a bed, of course, and lots of drawers. I wish I would have it now, but I don't. Then there was the living room, which was, my mother had that after the war. She got that. Because, you know, a building was blown up, so the furniture didn't survive too well. So she got that. It was oak, but her chairs were, I'm not kidding, the chairs were twice the size of this. Big, fat, red velvet. And there was this huge couch with red velvet as well. Everything was red velvet and dark furniture. I wasn't too enthusiastic. To me, it was too dark. And then there was the bedroom, which was the same. That one didn't. Excuse me, can you stop for a minute?
I do that all the time and I get told off. Go ahead. So your mother's, you were talking about the bedroom furniture.
My mother had a huge bed. We all like big beds. You can see, my bed is big too. I mean, with my husband, we had king-size beds, huge, super king. So she had a big bed, and it was gray and black. It was all shiny. I don't know what kind of wood it was. Who cares? And then there were a lot of Persian rugs, a lot of paintings and silver and whatever.
Did you have like your grandparents who had a maid's room of the kitchen? Did you have the same
Not
thing?
living with us, no.
But you had a maid's room, like a servant's room?
Yes, we did. But the only person who stayed there was the cook. And I still remember, I still have the recipes for the cake that she used to make.
She lived with you, the cook?
Yeah.
So what kind of domestics did your parents have?
She had the cook, and then we had a washerwoman who washed downstairs. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, or burden. What's a burden in English?
I don't know. Labor also, I don't know.
You know what? You know what I'm talking about?
No, he doesn't, but I do. Yeah, no, it's like a big round
It's
thing.
like this.
It's like a huge wooden something you wash in.
Yeah,
like
because
a washerwoman washes in.
yeah, that was the washerwoman. When she finished, she ironed it.
Where did she hang it? In the
I don't remember where she must have hung it somewhere.
Yeah.
I just remember washing it.
How often did the washerwoman come? How often did the washerwoman come?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
She came. I know that we always had cleaned it.
So you had the cook who lived with you, the washerwoman who came,
And somebody came in to clean, but they just came in.
and you had a nanny.
Oh, of course I had a nanny. Oh, of course. Great.
Did the nanny live with you?
Yes.
Where did she stay?
In my room.
So I think you have memories of this nanny, right? Because you had her until, so tell me about her.
Well, not so much, because she actually reported us to the She reported us to the Nazis in 1944.
Yeah, but by that time you were...
By that time, she wasn't living with us, because when the Nazis started to take over, my parents were not allowed to have servants. Well, I don't know what so everybody left.
So what can you tell me about her? What do you remember about your nanny?
Very little. I just remember, I have pictures of her.
Okay.
So that's what I really don't.
Do you know her name?
Aranka.
Aranka. So she
You
was
see, I
Hungarian.
know the name, but very few memories of her.
Do you know if she was from the countryside or Budapest?
I think my mother told me she was from the countryside. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure about that. But Emma Nanny was definitely from the countryside.
That was the cook.
Oh, No, her baking. Oh my God, those cakes.
She did all the cooking, all the baking. Your mother didn't cook.
My mother never learned how to cook, even here. But okay, I'm sorry, my children would be horrified when they hear this. My mother made very good Wiener Schnitzel. Layered cabbage. You know what that is?
Rakott káposzta?
Rakott káposzta, pontosan. And chicken, fried chicken. And that was her specialty. And, oh, I'm sorry. And goulash torta. Oh my God. That was her, and these are the four. Otherwise, she made good chicken soup.
Marietta,
God.
remember not to. I think it came off, Robert. Okay.
Okay, where were we?
What floor did you live on?
Second.
Second floor. And which way did your windows look?
Ülőjút, according to, I had the military base in front of me.
Kilian laktanya, I looked it up.
What?
Kilian laktanya. That was the laktanya
I
there,
told
yeah.
you that.
The casern, yeah. All the windows looked out on that street.
Yes, because I can't remember anything else.
And how many floors were there? So you were on the second floor?
Five.
5.
It had a huge balcony, and it had, just a minute, a square in the middle. It was just like here. You see condominiums on this side and this side.
Yes.
That's exactly the way the building was.
So you kind of had a garden in the middle.
Yes.
That's what you mean, yeah. You said that you had a nanny. I know your parents worked, but did they have a big social life during the day? I guess in the evening they worked with the movie theater. So what kind of social life did your parents have that you remember before the...
People used to arrive here after because most of their friends were in entertainment. The ball started rolling after 10 o'clock. That's when people came. And I learned how to sleep with that. Like, do whatever you want. Because it was still an apartment, not a house.
Do you know if they went out to cafes or...
Oh, sure they did. Especially my grandfather, all the time.
What did your mother do? Because you were mostly with the nanny. So what did she do during the day?
My mother was at home, but the nanny was there to clean me and wash me and feed me and whatever else.
So
But-
what did you do with your mother? What kind of activities?
My mother was home also.
No, but what did you do with your mother?
Oh, what did
What
I do?
kind of activities
I
did
went
you
out to the swimming. We went to Gellert. We went up to Schwabheit, to Sobochakheit, or whatever it's called now. And then the nanny came everywhere. Because if my mother wanted to go out, she didn't have to worry. It was like a permanent babysitter. So we went there. We went to, went to the mountains to ski. She wanted to teach me how to ski. No, she didn't, because she didn't ski. Somebody else wanted me to learn how to ski. And then after the war, I went to piano lessons to the Kordai on downtown, on Undershield.
That I wouldn't know.
You know, that you don't know. Anyway, whatever. And then because she never let me go alone anywhere. But after the war, I didn't have a nanny. I didn't have anybody.
Where did you go in the summer before the war, before, say, 44?
Before the war, I don't have any.
Before
idea.
44. Did you go on summer? Anything?
Yes, we went to, oh my God. Don't remember the name.
Was
But
it
we went with
mountains or
my
was it?
cousin. On my father's side, there was a cousin, the Kovacek, and we used to go to, first of all, my grandparents used to love going up to Sobotchak. They had a villa. They're not a villa, it's like a condominium. It was in a hotel, but they owned that, whatever it was. So that's where we went, but we didn't stay with them because it was small. And we went to Siófok,
Siófok.
and we went to Füred. Füred?
Balatonfüred.
Yeah, thank you.
With both your mother and your father, or just
My
your mother?
mother and
Just your
I.
mother.
My father was not around anymore.
Oh,
And
that's after the war. We're talking
this
about
was
now
after
after the
the
war.
war.
Okay.
where else did we go? That's it.
Who were your neighbors on Üllői út? Who do you remember as your neighbors?
That's a good question. I don't.
Yes, you do, because you did tell me about the házmester. Your
Oh,
daughter.
those people, yes, but that's. But other neighbors, I really don't. I just remember the housemester and the policeman. Those are the two people I remember.
What were your days like before 1944, as you remember? What did you do all day as a little girl?
What? Before 1944?
Yeah. When you were 5, 6 years old. Do you remember what you did? Like your daily routine, your daily
I went
activities?
to school at the age of 6 for 2 months or 3 months or whatever it was.
But before school, do you have memories from the time before school?
Not too much, no. No, that's something I don't remember. Because I remember going away with my mother, I told you, in the summer, and in the winter, by the way. We also went away in the winter. Because I loved going in the snow. I didn't know I end up in Canada. And that I remember. And I remember being together a lot with my cousin, who I don't even know whether she's really my cousin, but I called her my cousin, who is in England right now, by the way. And I went, and then, I also went skating with people. In, what was that? With the big statue?
A Korcsolya pálya.
Yeah, the Biannának a neve.
Near Hősök teren, near
Yeah,
Hero
that's
Square.
the
Yeah.
one. That's the one.
Yeah.
I used to go there all the time. Oh, my grandfather used to take me to the zoo, which I loved as long as he didn't feed me sweet, because I never had a sweet tooth. And he used to buy me these big pink things.
Vattacukor.
Me?
Vattacukor.
I used to hate it. But I ate it because my grandfather was so happy to give it to me, and I didn't want to lose. And I remember, oh my God, I used to say, oh, please, God, let them just not have it. And then we used to go to Bargates again. These are my memories. And we used to be together with my mother's close friends, who are in Australia, by the way, right now. They're all in Australia. And they are the ones we lived with after the war in Vienna, in the same hotel.
Okay, we'll come to that.
That's a bit further up the street.
What are your memories of those few months that you went to school? I imagine that you started school in September 1943, because that's when you turned 6, and you probably went until the German occupation in March 44.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah. So what are your memories of?
Very little.
But it's fine. But what are those little
Oh, okay.
memories?
It was very close to my house because I went to the Pratt Utsai Elementary School. What are my memories?
What teacher do you remember in
No,
particular?
I don't.
What classmates?
Nope. Yes, I do remember two. Yes, I do. And both of them came back from concentration camp. That's what I remember about them, without hair.
But you were very little. In 44, you were 7. If your classmates were 7, they would not have survived.
They did. One of the name was Eva Berger. The other one was Georgie, but I don't. Both her parents died. They all came, both of them came back without parents. I don't know how they survived.
Did you experience any anti-Semitism in school? Do you have any memories of that?
I don't have any memories of that.
And do you know how many of your classmates were Jewish, how many non-Jewish?
There weren't too many Jews in there.
There weren't too many.
No. No. We didn't live in a Jewish area.
No, you didn't.
We lived in,
Yeah, absolutely. How did life change when the Germans came into Budapest, March 1944?
March the 19th. That's when I was put into that room to stay there till October the 15th. And that was my own room, by the way. But they barricaded it with, I told you that.
Yeah, but you have to tell me
Oh,
again.
I have to
Sorry.
tell you again. Oh,
Yes.
my God. They barricaded it, and I stayed there the whole day. Now, if you ask me what I did, I always liked to, but I didn't know how to read that well. But I remember drawing, and I remember looking out the window all the time. I enjoyed also looking at the soldiers when they got undressed.
Undressed where? Across the street?
Yeah,
In the caserne.
that was my entertainment.
Do you remember what you saw on the street? Anything in particular, like any memories, sharp memories?
Yes, I remember that woman who got killed.
Tell me about that, please.
There was a woman who got killed by a car, and they just left her there, and there was blood all over. She was covered in paper, and there was blood on the paper. And I remember asking my mother, how come she's still there? She said, because she's Jewish. It's okay. And they don't move Jews.
Why did they need to hide you in particular? And why didn't your grandparents and your parents
You're right.
hid?
Because my grandparents had, we figured that one out, how to say it in English. Exemption.
Exemption, yeah.
Kivételezetség.
Exemption.
Okay. You see, not to be conscripted, is that the right word? Into or taken away. So they just stayed home with all the papers that they had from Horthy and from Szálasi.
How about the
But my mother had the same papers, but I didn't.
Why didn't you?
Because I wasn't a direct descendant.
Of your grandfather?
Oh my God, obviously. It was the wife and the children.
Who did they get this exemption from? How did they get this exemption? What's the story of that?
How did they get it? Through the person that was in business with my grandfather.
And how did he have... I know you don't want to tell his name, but how did he have these kinds of connections?
He knew Horthy personally. So that's the way that worked. But how we got the Szálasi, he did it. But he never told us how he did it, obviously. He didn't want to be murdered. I mean, he would have been killed just like everybody else. His son got killed.
Whose son?
This man's son.
On the front? As a soldier? As a soldier
on
in
the
the front?
Together, he was together with my father. It's interesting. They met in Russia.
He as a non-Jew, as a Christian, and your father
Yeah,
as a
that's
Jew.
right. They met.
What happened once your father left? Did your grandparents moved in, right? Tell me about that.
What? I'm sorry.
What? Sorry. Once your father was gone, did you stay alone with your mother in the apartment?
Yes.
And where were your grandparents?
They moved in with us afterwards
Why did they move in?
because they felt that this way everybody was protected there.
And what happened to their apartment or the
Left
house
it there,
they
left everything
owned?
there.
But your grandfather's movie theater was taken away because he was a Jew. Did they leave the building that he owned?
No, of course not.
So that was also taken
Everything
away.
was taken. Everything was taken.
And so they moved in.
They moved in with us.
Where did they stay in the apartment?
That's an interesting question. I think the maid's room. Or the cook's room, or whatever you want to call it. I think that's where they stayed. My mother stayed there, but there was always movement in that house.
When your grandparents were living there, did you still have the cook?
No.
No, so that by that time you were not allowed.
Nothing.
So who did the cooking and the shopping and
My grandmother.
your grandmother?
No, my grandmother was a fabulous cook. Oh,
And did she go out to do the shopping?
yeah.
Do you know anything about how they got food? Because there was rationing, there wasn't enough food.
I don't have any idea, but they seem to have gotten food.
But go on.
But in 1939, when the war broke out, my brother went out and we had a space. What's a space?
A pantry.
No, it's not a pantry. It's a room,
Yeah, it's a whole room, yeah.
right? And I bought I don't know how many kilos of beans, rice, lentils, which I still don't eat. And I don't like rice. I like beans, but that was different, like I still don't like the regular beans that people make, but the beans I'm okay with. What else? And then they bought a lot of ducks and they put it into this burden. What's burden?
It's a big jars.
What?
Big jars, big.
They are not jars.
Yeah, but they're like metal jars.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
See, this is my problem. I cannot translate. What's a burden in English? Well, you don't know it either. Okay. So they put all that, and then my mother in 42 or 43 killed a pig, a whole pig, and brought back the sausages and the meat and everything, and they all put it into fat and went into the space. And that's what we had. But nothing lasts forever, eh?
Where did she have that pig killed?
What?
Where did she kill that pig?
For the food.
No, where? Where did she go to?
Oh, it was this aunt of mine on Újpest, was not Jewish, but married my grandfather's Miklos. Wait a minute. Let me get that straight now. Nephew. Because I was thinking of Berta Nani and all the names. And she was not Jewish, so she had new people in the country. So that's the way we got to the pigs. And that was really good. That was good.
What are the dishes you remember from the war times that you ate a lot, that your grandmother made a lot?
Rétes.
That's sweet.
What?
Anything that's sweet.
But she never made it very sweet because she made it with cabbage and cherries. Sour cherries. Can't get sour cherries here. I mean, I went to Hungary, and the first thing that I went to get a Germla and a sour cherries. I knew exactly what I wanted. And I remember Richard saying, "How do you know this?" I said, "I'm not an idiot. I remember what goes on." And I always loved food, good food. Bad food I don't like.
Did you have enough food during the war? Were there times when you went hungry?
No, by the end of the war we didn't. No. And we didn't have any bread. My grandmother used to make bread, but there were too many bombings and everything else to stay upstairs and make bread.
But in that 6 months when you were hiding in a room, you still had enough food.
Oh, I did, yes.
Did they?
Sure, because they moved around normally. Everybody moved.
Were there any close calls while you were in hiding there?
Not that I can recall.
And when they put you in a room, you are 7. What did they tell you? Why do you have to hide there? What do you have to do?
They didn't tell me. They said to me, "It's better for me there." I didn't ask any questions because I listened to my mother. She said, "Better for me, so I stayed there." I don't know whether that, to me, does make any sense, and I never asked any questions.
Did anybody stay with you in that room so you're not alone all day?
Of course, my mother came in, my grandmother, everybody walked in and out. They just had to move the bookcase.
But they always put it back.
Yeah, they always put it, of course they put it back.
And when did you go out of that room? Did you
At night with the superintendent. When it got dark, I went out.
To do what?
Walk on the street. Went for long walks down to the Danube, it wasn't too far.
What kind of, what's the word in English?
Well, actually, the excitement, the really bad part of it started October the 15th.
We'll come to that, but I wanted to ask you that when you're going out with the superintendent at night, what kind of not warnings you got, like do's and don'ts, did your parents tell you?
Don't forget, I was already converted by that time.
That's the first I hear about that. So tell me about the conversion.
A minister came from the Luther Dietary Temple.
When? What year are we talking about?
In 44. No, in 43. Either 43 or 44. But I remember him, but look, I was still a child. Oh, God,
That's okay. Don't worry about it. So he came in 19, a Lutheran minister came to the house.
And he blessed me and he converted me.
Who arranged that? Who wanted that conversion?
I don't know, my mother, I suppose. My grandmother was also converted. Everybody got converted.
Your grandparents, your mother, and you?
Everybody got converted. We all
At the same time?
Yeah, at the same time.
And did you get papers? Conversion papers?
Sure. So we had this paper, we had the Salashi, we had the Horti, and we had the
conversion papers.
And the conversion papers. So we got converted. And I stayed that way till the age of what, 18?
Who came? We're in 44. You had to be hiding in that room. Who would be coming to visit your mother and your grandparents?
I don't know because I never saw that.
Did you hear people talking, having?
No, because they were it's an old building with thick walls.
And how did you go to the bathroom? How did you wash if you were always in that room?
I got out to go to the washroom. I knocked door. I don't know how I got out, but I know I went to the bathroom.
So you could kind of leave it, but leave the room, but they were very careful about
that nobody was around.
That nobody was around.
Well, I could leave the room when I went for a walk.
Yeah, but that was at night.
That was after dark, and the long days, so it was 9:30, 10 o'clock. Summertime.
Yes. Was there anybody in your building that you heard afterwards from your parents that would have denounced you or them? Was there any threat of being denounced?
Or being denounced?
Yeah, by other people living in the building who must have known that you were Jewish.
No, which is very interesting.
Why do you think that was? That nobody denounced your family?
I think because everybody liked my grandfather a great deal. Do you know when I went back to Hungary in 1978? The superintendent, not the one who took me for walks, she died. But there was another one who was there after the war. As soon as I walked in, he said, "Oh my God, a Józsi bácsi unokája." As soon as I walked in, I didn't remember her. But she remembered me. And she invited me for good cake. I like the cake. I don't like sweet. No, actually, I started not liking sweets here because I don't like anything with salt in it.
By the way, do you think that your grandparents paid for... Don't touch your mic. Do you think that your grandparents paid for any of the papers? Because they were well off, so they could have afforded to buy papers. Did you hear anything about that after the war?
I don't have any idea. I never asked.
And you never asked? Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I know we paid for when we escaped.
In 49.
What?
In 1949.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we paid. That I know. But whether they paid for that or not. No, I don't think they paid. I think it was something that he wanted to do for my grandfather. My grandfather was I suppose he was very much liked and respected and whatever. And he was not the most educated person, as you can imagine. But he learned. And I loved my grandfather. I really loved him.
You talk so much about your grandfather and your grandparents. Can you describe them? Like, as you remember them, you're good at... Can you describe your grandparents? Because you talked so much about them. What did they look like? How did they dress? What kind of people were they?
My grandmother was... I could show you pictures. My grandmother was very beautiful. She really was perfect features. And she dressed very plainly, always in a dark dress and a white collar. Every one of her outfits had dark white collar. That was it. And my grandfather was also very good looking. He was very good looking. Apparently he wasn't. I saw an old picture of my grandfather. I asked my mother, who the heck is that? He's so ugly with that nose from here to here. And my mother said, "It's your grandfather." I said, "No. My God, this is my grandfather. I don't want any part of him." And one of the things my mother was very worried about, that I will inherit his nose. And my children will inherit his nose. She was always very worried. As soon as they were born, first thing what she did, check the noses.
How did he dress, your grandfather?
What?
How did he dress, your grandfather?
Always in a suit. Suit and tie and white shirt
And what was their personality like, your grandparents?
My grandfather could be very strict. And so could my grandmother. They were both disciplinarian. So was my mother. I couldn't get away with too much, although I tried. But they were so good to me. My grandfather, as soon as he came home from work, first thing what he did was sit down and play gin rummy with me. And every time I won, I got an ice cream cone. And then my grandparents had this condominium, whatever, on Schwabhead, not on Széchenyi-hegy. Okay? Sorry. That's where they had it.
Yes, and?
And I used to love going up there. The other reason why I used to love going up there, because they had friends there with a grandson, and I was in love with the grandson, who is also in South America. So I used to go there and love, and there I had all the freedom. I had a bicycle, and I bicycled around, and I had all the freedom in the world. There were no cars. It was secluded. So I had the freedom that I loved. Climbing trees, whatever.
Going back to that 6 months that you spent hiding in the room, what...
Was it 6 months?
Well,
yeah,
from March 19th to October 15th, yeah.
Yeah, that's 6 months, yeah. That summer I didn't go anywhere.
As you remember, as you can recall, what kind of feelings did you have? Like, were you afraid? Were you uncomfortable? Like, what extent could they make you feel safe?
I trusted my family that nothing is going to happen to me. But I didn't know what was going on until October the 15th, when I had to leave my room. Except for that woman on the corner, on the side, not the sidewalk, in the middle. It was this way, and Ferenc József was this way. She was right in the middle of that. So I didn't know what was going on.
From your window, though, did you not see German soldiers or tanks or any?
The only time I
operation?
ever saw German soldiers, when the Germans marched in, and I loved it.
So you remember that day when the Germans came in?
Oh, yes. And
Well,
I remember I
it.
wanted to watch the parade, and my mother was so angry. She said, "You shouldn't be watching." I said, "Yes, I am. It's beautiful. It's great. They are singing. They are marching." I was a child. Come on. To me, there were horses. There were all these gorgeous-looking men. I mean...
And what did they say when you couldn't go to school anymore?
They told me it was bombing. There were too many bombs.
What memories do you have of the bombings? Not end of 44, but earlier.
The first big bombing was on April the 3rd, 1944, 43, 40. No, I was 6, 43. And my aunt, my grandmother's side, they had a toy factory. I used to get the most beautiful toys. And I remember, and this is something my mother was so shocked, because she really was angry. I mean, that's why I remember it, because she got angry with me. I said, "And who is going to give me the toys if they bombed it out?" What do you expect from a 6-year-old? And my mother said, "You have to think about your aunt and your uncle and not the toys."
You said that you weren't really aware of the war until October 15th. What happened then? What happened then? The Aerocross took over, and what happened in your life or in your family's life?
When?
October 15th, 1944.
My grandfather's partner came over. And I remember him sitting in that hallway, which serves only coffee and tea. And he said, and he was all dressed up in his uniform. I've never seen that before. I mean, I was impressed. And I was allowed to come out of the room. So, and my mother told me that he swore, I remember him, but I don't remember him saying that. So as long as I'm alive, nothing will happen to the Bogner and the Haas family. I promise you that. Then he came back with all these exemptions. But I had to be safe. So I went to his house. And I told you about the maid who...
But tell me, it doesn't matter what you told me because you have to tell it on camera. So,
Anyway, we went to his house on Oshadom.
how did you get there? Do you remember the journey going there?
Yeah, somebody picked me up by car from the government.
And your mother went with you?
Yeah, of course. So we went there, but the only condition was that because the servants come in at 7 o'clock in the morning and they leave at 8, I don't understand why they weren't living there, but they weren't, whatever. Come to think of it now. But they weren't. Anyway, so we had to leave the house at 6:30, 6:45 in the morning. And we walked all day till 7 o'clock at night. Or 8 o'clock at night, sorry.
Where did you walk?
Everywhere. Just up and down everywhere.
What?
And this is where we ended up because it's, you know, was a nice fall day. And this is where we ended up on the Danube, the
Rakpart.
Rockport. Thank you. What is that in English?
Shores of the Danube.
Whatever. Anyway. And I remember seeing all those people there, and I heard gunshots. But I didn't hear the gunshots. I just heard the noise. And I remember asking my mother what was going on, and she said nothing. Don't worry about it.
But did you see the people?
We had to get out of there. My mother said, we are leaving. Like, let's get out of here. But as we're walking on, I saw the people, and I said, what are they doing? And I remember my mother said something, they are going swimming. My mother says she doesn't lie, right?
What kind of close calls did you have during these walks?
The only one that we had was when my mother met this ex-classmate of hers on the streetcar. Was it the bus? No, streetcar. There was the hatos villamos streetcar. And that's what she told me. She was really afraid. And she knew she belonged to the Nazi party. So she was really afraid to even get off the not train, the...
Streetcar.
What?
The streetcar.
The streetcar. Can't even think in English or in Hungarian anymore. The streetcar. And she was afraid to get off. She didn't know whether she should stay on. She told me that afterwards. She never told me that. Now I wouldn't have understood it anyway. Anyway, she said that was the closest call they ever came to. And when we came back from Budafjord,
Balatonfüred.
Balaton, sorry, thank you. Balatonfüred, I'm getting, like Balatonfüred. When we came back and we met one of the Rolnizo, the film...
The one who puts back the film and
yeah. What did they call it in English?
Projectionist.
Yeah, but I guess so. Projectionist.
The what?
Projectionist.
Projectionist. He didn't project anything. He just
The one who puts back the
rolling.
film, you know, like because the film goes all the way to the other one and it has to go back to the one.
So the projectionist does that.
Yeah.
What?
Projectionist does that, according to him. He studied that. Yeah, so...
To me, it's a Rolnizo who turns things. It's a turner.
And so you met
I
him.
met him on the corner as we got off the train. And he said, you came back a good time because the Jews are just leaving over there at the Keleti pályaudvar. Because we were on Öllőút, and he said, just go that way. And my mother didn't say anything, and we headed back to our apartment.
But you ran a little bit ahead. I wanted to ask you, while you were, how long did you stay in this benefactor's house on the Buda side, on Rózsadomb?
On Rózsadomb, not that long, because he decided it was too dangerous. And also he felt that, that's what my mother told me,
Obviously.
I mean, that he also felt that it was too dangerous, just in case somebody sticks around longer than when we arrive. Then what? And not only that, he would have gotten killed too. I mean, we would have all been finished. So he figured that's when we went to Balatonfüred to his sister.
So I think you said that you stayed about a month.
If that long. I don't remember. My
May-
mother would remember, but I never asked that.
Where were you staying inside the house? Where were you
Oh,
sleeping?
a beautiful room. We had, come on.
So you were not hiding inside the house?
No, I wasn't hiding. We had supper with them. We had servants. No, we never no servants serving us, but
Who was his family? How many members of his family were
two.
there? Just him and his wife?
Yeah, because their son was already in Russia at the time.
And his wife knew who you were?
Oh, yeah, of course. I don't remember his wife's name. I just remember his name.
And all day you're walking. I mean, you're a seven-year-old little girl. Like, walking all day, that must have been quite tiring for you.
Was horrible. I still don't like to walk.
Would you sit somewhere to eat? Would you go into a restaurant?
We were too scared to go into a restaurant.
Why?
My mother could have bumped into somebody she knew. Look, she knew a lot of people from the theater. And she went to school there, come on. 12 years of schooling, you meet a lot of people.
So where did you eat?
We didn't. We had some food that we brought with us. And this is where we got down to the Danube. Because my mother was even afraid to sit down. I never really understood what the problem was. My mother told me to walk, so I walked. What was I going to do?
No complaints? Did you not complain that you're tired, that your feet are tired?
I don't remember complaining. I'm not a complainer. Because I'm a man. I'm really not a complainer. I'm very good at that.
What other memory stands out of these walks, all day long
The
walks?
Danube one.
That's the only one. What did the city look like? By that time there were
Wasn't too
bombings.
bad. There were bombed out houses, but nothing but I saw after the war. And I think most of the damage was done outside of Budapest, in Újpest and all that. There wasn't that much bombing, I don't think. I don't know. I really don't know.
Did you take, once you remember taking the streetcar, did you take public transportation at other times to go to some part of the city to walk there, or you walked everywhere?
We walked everywhere. We never took it, except that one time. I think my mother, I don't know why we took that streetcar. She never wanted to take another one after that.
What did you do if it rained?
With a raincoat.
Because mid-October to mid-November, that's kind of like rainy.
Oh, it was cold. That I remember, it was cold. But by December, we were back at our own building. You see, that was also a big chance to take. Because everybody knew who we were. To move back into where we used to live.
How did you keep in touch with your grandparents while you were on Rózsadomb, on the Buda side?
My mother, I don't have any idea. I'm sure telephone,
But you didn't, you didn't see your grandparents.
I didn't see them. I didn't hear about them. Nothing. I suppose telephone. My mother phoned them. I never asked. Very good question.
Any other memories from these few weeks that you were staying with these people?
Just remember that beautiful house. Sort of. Not completely. And I remember the big, this thick covers. This is what I remember. And of course I enjoyed it after all that walking. Okay? I mean,
So once he felt that it was really dangerous, he sent you down to Balatonfüred to his sister's house. How did you go there? What are your memories of that journey?
No, by train. No, we went there by car. We were dropped off. But when we decided to come back, we had to come back by train with all the chickens and the cows and everybody else.
So you went to Balatonfüred. You're staying in this house. What is this house like? The sister's house.
It was, I think it was almost a regular farmhouse. Nothing special to talk about. I just remember the dinner table, which was gorgeous.
Because?
Because I liked all the wood. It was light wood. It wasn't dark wood.
Where did you sleep? Where did you stay in that house?
We had a room. Until they, of course, shoved me into the cupboard.
Who was there? There was the sister there. Who else lived there?
My mother was there and I were there. And then that was... The only reason why I know it was a Saturday and a Sunday we were there, because Saturday they were going from door to door, picking up the Jews.
Who was going?
The Nazis, I suppose.
The Arrow Cross?
Yeah. And that's when they put me into the cupboard to stay there.
Because?
They didn't want me to talk. They were really afraid. Everybody was afraid of me. Not because I'm so frightening, but because I was a child. So I was put into that cupboard, but they stopped 3 doors before they got to this person's house. Okay, do you?
How long did you spend in the cupboard?
No, all night.
What are your memories of sitting in a cupboard all night?
I still cannot go into a closed room. It was awful. And I cannot be in the dark. Used to drive my husband crazy. We went to a hotel room and I put all the lights on. And he said, "What's you doing?" I said, "I'm putting the lights on. What do you think I'm doing?" So I suppose it affected me mentally much more than I can recall. But I remember sitting there, and there wasn't much clothes. That's all what I remember, so I had room to move. So it was a cupboard which was probably used for guests, or I don't know.
Like a wardrobe, more.
Yeah, it was like a wardrobe, yeah.
In a room, not in the kitchen.
Yeah. Anyway, I stayed there.
What did you do all night? Did you sleep?
Yeah, I went to sleep. What could I do? I don't even remember anybody gave me a pillow or anything. I don't know. Maybe I took some of the clothes off, whatever was there. I managed on that.
And so they stopped?
Yeah, and then when they found out that they stopped, I came out. But then the breakfast table.
So this woman was living alone. She had no husband, no children.
The husband was in the army. They were all army people.
So what happened in the morning?
Well, not in the morning. Sometimes during the day, and this is something my mother told me, that she told her that she's expecting visitors who are very strong Nazis, hate the Jews, so you better keep quiet. Don't say anything, just sit there. And then I think my mother mentioned that what should they do with me? They couldn't shut me into the cupboard again. Somebody would ask the question, why is she in the cupboard? So I remember my mother told me, she said to me, one thing, you're not allowed to say one word in the dining room, but not one word. And, but I thought about that later on. I said, how come I couldn't say hello or something? I mean, walk into a room and you don't say anything. Anyway, this is what I remember. Not a word. And then they suggested that we should go and look at the trains. And of course, my mother told me, she said, well, I got all enthusiastic. Trains, of course, child, trains, great idea. And I don't even know when my mother knew what kind of trains they were, or what was that. Anyway, we went to the trains on a Sunday, that I remember. And as I told you, the doors didn't open.
Were they cattle cars?
What? Yeah,
Were they cattle cars?
Yeah, they were all cattle cars. And I just heard some funny noise, but I remember one thing I asked my mother, I said, didn't I ask any questions? What the heck is going on? She said, yes, you did. And I told you that there are cows in there. So I know exactly what those trains look like. I can still see them when I close my eyes. And these people, my mother told me, they were clapping, they were so happy. I felt sorry for my mother's friend because she was really caught between, she was too afraid not to get enthusiastic, but at the same time, she wanted to respect my mother. It was caught in between. I don't know, I never asked my mother how she reacted to all that. But it must have been very unpleasant for her.
Any other close calls at this house?
This wasn't close call. Oh,
No,
yeah,
but
it was the night before, but not when we were at the train. It wasn't a close call.
Any other memories of that house or your time
Very
there?
little. We only stayed there for 3 days.
Oh, 3 days.
Yeah,
That's it.
so I have because my mother got very scared from the Nazis coming from door to door. And they were coming because those trains were coming, so they were going to take them to those trains, whatever trains they were called. And I suppose they all went to Auschwitz, because from Hungary, most of them went to Auschwitz.
So, you stay 3 days. What happens then?
Can I get up?
Sure. Yeah.
No, because I'm really having...
I'm recording.
Okay, so we were talking about you leaving that Balatonfüred house after a few days, and I was going to ask you about your train ride back. How was it?
The cows, I never forget that.
Cows.
Cows and chickens, that's where we were put, because that's what she said. Best idea is to look like a peasant. So my mother put on, and I remember the kerchief. I don't know whether she looked like a peasant or not, but I put on a kerchief, and I was a little girl, so I could look like a peasant. And so she would be, but it was a long ride. I don't remember how long it was, but I was thirsty, and I wanted water. Up to today, I cannot be thirsty.
How long was the
Oh, I don't know. To me, it was 100 hours. How long is the train from Führer to Budapest?
Not long, but what I mean is, did they have to stop?
They stopped everything because the chickens had to get off and the cows had to get off, and there were no pigs. I remember the chickens and the cows. Mm-hmm. And I still don't like chickens when they go near me. What's he doing? What's she doing?
I think she ate, and again, she ate too fast.
What? Did she throw up?
No, she just ate. It happened the last time I was here, too.
Okay, I am going to after that.
She's going to be okay. Now she's fine. So you came back, you went back to the house. Your mother
That's
decided...
when we met, what do you think you called them? Projectionist.
And did you go back to hide in the room?
I went back to the apartment.
No, but you didn't hide in the room. They didn't
No,
hide
they
you in the
didn't
room
put me
anymore.
anywhere. I just went back. With too much bombing, because it didn't come along. Anyway, the only bad part of it was that I was the only one, and my mother, who couldn't go down to the basement when there was a raid,
Why couldn't you go down?
because my mother was too afraid that somebody will report us who hasn't seen us going into the house. Look, it was an apartment building with many people there. She didn't know who was a Nazi, who wasn't. I mean, the policeman could come up 10 million times, but if somebody comes in with a machine gun and I'm going to shoot everybody unless you tell me, what's he going to do?
So you never went down to the basement, to the cave?
Yes, I did. The end of December, I remember Christmas, we went down. Well, that was practically, and the bombings were getting worse and worse and worse. But every time somebody came in, as I told you, this policeman used to say, I had a cover, and they covered me up like a dead body. Actually, I was
Where were you covered up?
in my bed,
And when did they have to cover you up?
that nobody should see me, because everybody was afraid that I'm going to talk. So if a stranger came in, they covered me up, that I'm not there.
Did they tell you to keep quiet? And
Yeah, oh
don't
yeah,
move?
of course. Shut up. Don't say a word. So I didn't, I suppose. I mean, I'm here, so I suppose I didn't. Anyway, in the basement, and then this is something I know from my mother, not for me, but I remember the second part. January the 11th, 1945, right? Two people came in, and they were looking for Jews. I was covered up. They see me, and the policeman said, "There are no Jews here. What do you think?" Da da da. And I remember him yelling. That I remembered. I didn't know why he was yelling, but he probably wanted to make a point. Whatever. 2 days later, they put 250 grenades under the building.
These Aerocross people who came in. Why?
Because they said there were Jews there. They didn't believe the people. So might as well blow up everybody along with it. Anyway, the building went up from the bottom, up, right? And the basement collapsed, of course. And I remember everybody, including my grandfather, was down. My grandmother was upstairs. But she was in the kitchen, which was not close to the wall that was blown out. So she stayed there. We were positive she died. Look, we saw what happened. Anyway, she walked down in her makeup and everything else. That was... So, I remember everybody digging, all these men digging to get out. We got out, and that's when we arrived with all the bombings and all the people on Kurd, the horses, dead horses, people hanging on the trees. This is something I do remember. Dead people on the Kurd. I suppose they died. Somebody shot them or bombing or whatever. But on the other side, we were on the Uluyut, and we had to cross Yusuf Kurd, right? That was Yusuf Kurd. And we ended up on the other side, and that was occupied by the Russians. Because they went, I don't know whether you know that, I'm sure you do, they went door to door. Anyway, we got into the Russian side, and my mother was happy. The only problem, my mother got very badly injured, and she almost lost a leg because of it.
In the blow,
Yeah,
when the house blew up?
Because there were no doctors and nurses. It got infected. And she still had a mark for the rest of her life, a huge mark on her leg.
But you told me something about when you said that you went down to the basement at Christmas because there was continuous bombing, right? So what was in the basement? How was it organized?
Everybody was down in the basement.
How was it except for your
Furnished.
grandmother?
It wasn't furnished.
What was in it?
Everybody brought down. Everybody seemed to have a bed. I just remember a lot of beds.
What else was down there?
Nothing else is a bed.
What did you light with? How did you have light?
Candles. And that's something else, you see, when I told you that I explained it to you. Do you want me to explain it
Yes.
again? Oh, God. Can I use this? Isn't it?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Imagine this is a wall. People on this side, people on that side. There's one bed here, there's one bed there. And because the wall was thick enough, there was one bed here and one bed this way. Now, wait a minute. I was on this side, okay? But my mother was here, but my mother's feet were here, and her head was facing that way. And my head was here. Is that so clear? And my feet were there. So I asked the person who was on the other side here, was 15 years old by that time, and the policeman's daughter. And I asked her whether we could change places, because I want to be lying near my mother's head, not her feet. And also, the candle was near my mother's head, so I wanted the candle too. So we changed places. And when the basement collapsed, the retaining wall fell on her side. Had I been here, it would have fallen on my side. She died. I can still hear her screams. That's something I never forgot. And it was her father who had just saved our lives.
How did he save your life?
Anybody came in, there are no Jews. He's the one who told them. He was a high-ranking officer in the police.
And why do you think he helped your family?
What?
Why do you think he helped your family? He was a policeman. He was a part of that system.
Because the righteous Christian, right? His wife died. He was the only one who stayed alive. Is that fair? Tell me. I still, that's one thing I still dream about.
What did you eat in those last, when
The
when
only
the
thing
siege
what we
started?
had was, what my mother bought was the Gashly, no. Wasn't
Gashly?
No, not Gashly. Little piece like that.
Peas?
Yeah. But yellow piece.
That's all you had by that time.
Nothing else. Of course. How much can you, the pork was gone, the pig was gone, the ducks were gone, the cow was gone.
You mentioned, though, that one of your Christian relatives brought you food. Who was that, and when was that happening? Earlier you mentioned that somebody had a Christian wife and she brought
Oh,
food.
yeah, that's right. This is my cousin. You probably may know the name, who my cousin was. Guy Vilmos. He was the Minister of Finance after the war. He was an ardent communist.
And he brought food to your family? His
No,
wife?
he didn't. His mother did. And I also stayed with them.
During the war?
Yeah, during the war, my mother sent me out there. Újpestre.
When? When was that? You didn't mention that before.
When? Sometimes in October, November. That I shouldn't be in that room all the time. As a matter of fact, my cousin, when we were there, teased Richard. He said, I slept with your wife.
Do you remember how, we're talking December, and I know Don't touch that. I know that the winter of 44 was a very cold winter. How did you keep warm in the apartment and down in the cave?
I don't remember being cold. I really don't. But there was heat in the basement somehow. I don't know from where. Look, I was a child. Do you think I cared as long as it wasn't cold?
But you may have seen difficulty in getting coal or wood, I mean, I'm asking questions because I never know what you may remember, I'm
No,
trying
that's
to...
something I don't remember. You know, there was a wooden fireplace. Now that you're talking. But no coal. There was no coal.
Wooden fireplace in the apartment or in the basement?
In the basement.
In the basement.
I don't remember what the heat was in the apartment. We certainly didn't have a fireplace.
How did you feel? You were a little girl who was already once locked in a cupboard, who didn't like the dark. What were your feelings being down in the basement?
I almost enjoyed it. There were a lot of people there. I could talk to them. I would play cards. And
Other children?
no, everybody was playing with me. I was the toy. I was the little one.
And did you know these people from the house?
Yeah, they were living in the building. I knew of them. Not so much them.
Any other close calls that you recall, apart from these Nyilas, these Aerocross who came in on January the 11th, in December while you were there in the apartment?
It was January the 11th.
That's...
No.
And when the house was blown up, you got yourselves out of
We
the
went
rubble.
across the street.
You ran across.
And we stayed there in the... Do you remember the Boros Coffee House?
Baros?
Boros.
Baros or Boros?
Vagy Boros, vagy Boros. Mit tudom én?
No. Where was it?
On the corner of Ülői út and József körút.
You had the Kilian, the Laktanya, the Kazern on one side, your building on the other side.
And this was on this side. Look, the soldiers were here. Our house was here.
Mm-hmm.
And the Kavi house was here.
Mm-hmm. That corner, okay.
The same side as the Burograph. That's all what I can tell you. And Burograph was József körút 63.
And so you ran over to that cafe.
Well, we didn't run too much because there were too many bodies and too many horses and everything else on the road.
So how did you get over there?
We walked. I don't think we ran.
You, your mother, and your grandparents.
Yes.
Anybody else from the house?
I suppose everybody else, whoever was alive, because don't forget, half the people died.
Where were the Germans? Where were the Germans at that point? Do you know?
I don't remember where were they.
The Russians were on that corner.
One house away from our house.
Were Germans.
Yeah.
On Ülői.
On Ülői, this way. They were coming from Újpest, whatever. What was it? Yeah, it's Újpest.
From out, the outer part, or like the side where your house was, or the side that
No,
was
on the
going?
side that our house was. They were one house away.
How long did you stay in that cafe with the Russians?
Quite a while. I don't remember. As long as, okay, I do remember, because the first place we moved to was my cousin when the ghettos were liberated. When was the ghettos liberated?
January 18th.
What?
January 18th.
So it's pretty close, so maybe 5 days, 6 days. And that's when we went over there.
Where did you sleep in a cafe?
Chairs, whatever. And there was no coffee, I remember that.
How were the Russian soldiers with you, with your mother, with your family?
Very good. They, as a matter of fact, I told you the story that my mother, that the soldier asked my mother that after the war, if he doesn't survive, he asked my mother to take it to Russia, the watch. I have the watch.
So they were good to, and in what other ways were they good to you, the
They
child?
gave me bread. They were, whatever they had, they shared. But I remember my mother, this I never understood why. She always wore makeup, up to here too. She got up in the morning, she put on her makeup and away she went. And that time she just looked awful all the time. I didn't know why. Well, nobody explained it to me. Well, because the soldiers were actually molesting women. So anyway, one of my mother's friends was actually molested. Well, not molested, actually. Forced.
Raped.
Rape.
When the ghetto opened, your relatives, who were they? On which side?
They were my grandmother's brother, sister-in-law, and son.
They went back to their apartment.
And everything was fine. Nothing happened there.
Where was that apartment?
Right near the Opera House. I don't remember the address.
That's fine. And you went there.
And we went there.
And how long did you stay there?
Till May. Till April or May. Yeah, but we didn't really have an apartment. We didn't have anywhere to go.
But your apartment didn't blow up, right? part of
Yes,
it
one of
did?
the walls blew out.
So which part, what did you lose?
I don't know the wall. Somebody built the wall.
No, but what did you lose? Were there like rooms that you lost that collapsed with the half
Oh,
of the
all the
building?
furniture went. Everything in that room, obviously.
So what was left when you came back?
Nothing. Except the living room and my room.
And,
And
the
the
rest
others
was,
were all gone.
because
Everything
that
else.
was that part of the house that collapsed, right?
Yeah.
So when did you move back?
To the house. Probably in May, not before. May, April.
Was it then rebuilt, or was it still in ruins, or was it rebuilt by the time you moved back?
No, my windows, I remember that, were still in ruins. But it was summer coming up, so I didn't care. Well, nobody else did. I don't know.
But the wall was put back.
Oh, yeah, the walls were there.
And how did your family pick up life? What happened?
My grandfather opened the Tatra. And opened...
No, he opened the Bodograph because he still
and
had
the Bodograph and the Tatra. Tatra replaced the Ondashi. Okay? And then he had the Bodograph and the Tatra. And that's the way life went on. Till October the 15th, back to October the 15th. When, no, October the 24th, sorry. When the movie houses were nationalized.
Which year? 48.
48.
Did your mother just continue working for her father, or did she get another job?
No, she didn't have a job. And as a matter of fact, one of the reasons we left, because they were threatening to jail my grandfather as a capitalist. And then apparently the movie gang there, whoever, the gang said, no, you cannot do that to Mr. Bogner or whatever they called him, but you can jail his daughter. You cannot touch him. Daughter, do whatever you want. And my mother said she didn't like that, so we left.
You went to school, though, after 45,
Sure,
after
I did.
liberation.
I told you, I went to Derek.
To what school? It
Derek.
doesn't matter what you told me. You have to tell me again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Derek Dairy Elamy. On yeah, right next to the church.
The Lutheran.
Yeah, the Lutheran, yeah. And I studied Lutheranism, sure. And I went to church there and whatever. It was pretty close to our house. Wasn't too far.
It was quite a. How did you get there? It's quite.
By streetcar, 5. I think it was number 5. Not the 6, the 5.
And you went on your own, or your mother would take you to school?
I went most of the time alone.
What do you remember of that schooling? You went for quite a few years. You went for 4 years.
No, I didn't go for 4 years. Where are you getting that idea from?
You left in 49,
Yeah.
and you started school in
Oh,
45.
yeah, you're right. I didn't think about it. I went that long. No, I didn't go that long because the schools closed in November because there was no coal. And they didn't open till May. So I went maybe 2 or 3 months. I don't know whether you know that.
Now that you mentioned, yes.
Okay? So I was wondering, I didn't go to school that much. And then I went to 45, 46. There was still a coal closure. And in 47, yeah. I never went to full year. Never till we left. First time I went to full year was here.
What were the conditions in the school?
Seemed to be normal when we had heat. But I remember, the only thing that I remember very well from that is I was so shocked when we came here that I studied geometry and algebra and all that in grade 6, I suppose, or grade 5. And these people were doing it in grade 8 or grade 9. And I thought, oh my God, what are they doing? They're so backward.
Did you keep up your religion, your Lutheran religion, after the war? How did you keep up your Lutheran religion after the war?
I went to church.
And what did your grandparents and your mother say?
Nothing. Nobody interfered.
Why did you want to go to church?
Because I liked it. I liked the sermons. I liked the music. I still like the music. But I prefer the Catholic Church music.
So it was something that became really something that came from inside.
And don't forget, I was in a convent.
In Austria, yeah.
In Austria. So this was part of me. And in the convent, even though they knew I wasn't Catholic, they accepted me because I was Christian.
How much talk there was about the war and your experiences in your school after the war?
Nothing. I remember the first time I went to a Canadian family. By that time I was in university. A friend of mine. And I'm sitting at the dinner table and they said, how did you manage on the war? And he said to me, we didn't have any sugar. And I thought to myself, what the hell are you talking about? And then she said, that was funny. She said, we didn't have sardines either. I thought to myself, you're lucky.
But now you're talking about Canada, but I'm talking about the Lutheran school in Hungary. Was there any talk about what happened during the war?
No. Most of the kids in my class were all converted.
They were all Jews?
They were all Jews, but we were all converted.
What were the conditions of life after 45, after the liberation in Budapest?
For me, it wasn't bad. Because life continued. The theaters were doing well, the movie theaters were doing well, so we were comfortable.
How about food, getting clothes?
I don't know where it came from, but it came. We always had it after the war. Why are you asking me that? I thought everybody did.
No.
Okay, sorry about that. I didn't know that. I really didn't know that.
How did your grandparents and your mother refurbish the apartment? You say there was nothing left.
No, not completely nothing. She had to buy a new living room. That's when that big fat couches came in after the war. The bedroom was gone, so she bought just a bed and a dresser. I don't think she wanted a bedroom set anymore. And I had a nice room. My room was really nice, especially my hair and the lamps. And you know what? I went back in 79, 78 or 79. And do you know, I went to see the house, and I went upstairs, and everything was there the way I left it. That was scary. I knew where everything was.
You left. When did you leave Hungary?
December 2nd, 1949.
And you explained that your mother had to go because she was afraid that she'll be jailed. How did you get out of the country?
Walking.
Did you have papers? Was it?
No, we didn't have papers. We had what's it called? Guide.
So you were smuggled through the
Smuggled.
border.
That's the word. That's what I was looking for. Getting tired even. And yeah, we were smuggled out with smugglers.
Can you describe that journey from Budapest to Vienna?
No, we went from Budapest to Pécs, and in Pécs we started walking.
Not Pécs, because Pécs is down in the south.
Okay,
so it's
then
either
Győr.
Sopron,
Győr.
Győr.
Sorry.
How did you get there? You went by train.
But we went by train, and the smuggler got wedding papers that my mother was his wife, and I was his daughter.
And you got off the train in Győr and?
And we met Ferry. That's what I remembered. His name I remember. And he took us for a walk, nice long walk.
Yeah, but how did you get across the border? Did you walk at night?
No, it was all night we were walking. How did we get across the border? They had grenades on the border. So when we got to the border, we were told, do not move. I will lift your foot, and that's where I put it down, that's where you're going to step. And I never forget that, because he lifted my foot, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to, it's a very unpleasant when somebody lifts your foot. Anyway, we got through it, we weren't blown up. Somebody was blown up right after us. Lost a leg.
And you walked through the border region,
and we walked, and then we ended up in this village, which was still under the Russian zone, if you remember. And we got to this village, and we got to this real typical Hungarian, Austrian village. The best food. Again, I'm coming back to food. I love the food. And I got the best bed. I never had a bed like this. So we stayed there a couple of nights, and then we couldn't stay there forever because we were going to go to Vienna. And then as we continued by car, that time we were picked up by car, we were stopped by the Russians at the border. And my mother always carried money with her. She had, $50 was a lot of money at the time. She gave $50 to the police who arrested us, and we walked further. We left.
Why did you choose Vienna? Or why did your mother choose Vienna?
Closest to walk to.
And where did you stay in Vienna?
We stayed.
With whom?
Not with whom.
You didn't know anybody
No,
there?
we went to a Pension France, which was right opposite the Stephanskirche. And then we moved to Fürstenhof, Hotel Fürstenhof. As a matter of fact, I went back to Fürstenhof, and I met the grandson, and he dug up my mother's papers. And he was so happy. He said, oh, Listen, I knew how many people were here. Said, you're the first person who came back.
How long did you stay in Vienna?
From December to the Korean War, which was in August.
Oh, 1950. So you stayed there like 6 months
More.
or more, yeah.
More.
So what did you do in
Nothing.
Vienna?
We had a good time. We went to movies, and then we sneaked out to go to the Prater, and because that was in the Russian zone, and everybody got hysterical.
Why did you leave Vienna when you left?
Because of my mother got scared when the Korean War broke out that the Russians will close in Vienna because we were still surrounded with Russians.
So where did you go?
Salzburg.
And how long did you stay there?
How long did I stay there? From...
Like you went August 50?
Yeah, we were in 49, 50, we came in 51, so I stayed there from 50 to 51.
So you stayed there the whole time until coming. And why Salzburg? Why not somewhere in Germany?
Because we knew some people in Salzburg.
And you stayed with them?
No. But at least my mother said that, yeah, suppose, she said, I know somebody there.
How was your life in Salzburg?
I enjoyed it. I didn't think about anything else. I enjoyed it. I had friends. I had my first love. I had my first kiss. What else it knew?
But you said you went to school there, so tell me
Yeah, I
about
went
that.
to convent. I didn't confess to that.
You went to regular school in the convent?
Yeah. No, I had special classes to learn German. And I spoke quite good German at the time. I had piano lessons there.
Where did your mother have money from? Because I guess she didn't work. You said she didn't work.
Where did my mother have money? She took some of it with her in the walk. And we had some money out here, not too much. But when we arrived here, we had $200 to our name.
You came to Canada in March 51. Why did your mother choose Canada?
Why did my mother? Because of the climate. I'm not kidding. She didn't want to go to Australia, too hot. She didn't want to go to South America, it was too hot. So she chose Canada with 50 below zero. I used to stay there at the beginning. I used to come home crying with the snowstorms and everything. And I said, I am going to grow up and go to Australia.
What do you know about how she arranged the papers to come here? Or if you had sponsors, or how did you manage to come here?
She just applied. But we had a lot of problems with Canada to get in here because my mother had typhoid fever which affected her lungs. And at that time, they saw you something on the lungs, Canada wouldn't let you in. So finally she managed to do something. I really don't want it because that's already Canada.
You arrived in March 51. Did you know anybody here? Was there any help here?
Yes, one couple, that's all.
From where? Where were they
from? From Hungary. My
Hungary.
mother's friends from Hungary.
What kind of help did you get when you got here?
Nothing. That's what I told you.
Nothing.
Nothing. Yes, from my mother's friends who we knew.
Do you remember your first impressions of Montreal?
I hated it. I came here and I said to my mother, I remember that, I said to my mother, you brought me to wilderness. Because we were coming by train from Halifax. And you know, we were in Austria, Switzerland, all that. Everything is built up and they're mounted. Here it was flat and no houses except snow. I cried and I cried and I cried. I told my mother after a few months, I'm leaving. I'm going back to Europe.
How did she react?
What?
How did she react?
She said, go ahead, but I'm not giving you money for it. That was her reaction.
What were the first steps? Where did you find an apartment? How did you find
My
work?
mother, no, these friends of my mother's who were here, got us a sublet in a duplex on NDG Avenue. So that's where we were. Now, again, I hated it. There were stairs, there was slippery. Oh, it's mine.
Stop it. You said you hated the stairs. That's where we were. Your first apartment.
I cried all the time. Then I went to a boarding school. And that was even worse. I went to Miss Edgar's and Miss Cram's. You know what that is? It's one of the high-class boarding schools in Montreal. How my mother discovered it, I don't know. But that's where I ended up. My roommate was an African diamond mine's daughter. But we had a good time. We used to sneak out in the middle of the night through the window. We went to see the boys. It was fun. So at least I didn't cry.
Why did your mother put you in a boarding school?
To learn English. Then she decided she was going to send me to camp. Well, from the camp I escaped. Literally I escaped. Because I don't like cold showers. I don't like cold water to wash in. I don't like hot beds. That's not for me. Thank you very much. I was ready to go back to Europe again. These beds are soft.
We're still talking about you arrived in March, so I guess you went to the private school the end of the school year.
That's right.
The
and
camp
in the summer
of
for
51.
2 weeks, a Y camp. Oh, that was another way. Oh, yes. And they had bunk beds. And I thought somebody was going to fall on top of me, on top of other things. After 2 weeks, I phoned my mother and I said, I'm coming home, but you can't. I said, watch me. I was going to hitchhike. There was one place. To me, camp is still like a nightmare.
How did your mother find work? How did your mother find work?
She went to work.
Don't touch your mic.
Oh,
Yeah, she went to work.
she went to work at the Monkland Theatre with the buffet. Remember we had that? She worked there for $20 a week. And then she found this work with Wonder Bra. And that's where she was till she retired.
You mentioned that your first sublet was on NDG Avenue. How long did you stay there? Did you
Not long. Because we found that place on Monkland. And it was a little apartment. It was nice because we had a garden in the back. It was pretty.
What happened to your grandparents? Did they stay in Hungary?
No, they came in 52. And then we moved to a bigger apartment because we needed it. Because my mother and I had a living room and a bedroom.
You went to this private school for those few months in 51.
My mother couldn't afford more than that.
And then where did you start going to school from September?
To West Hill. To Herbert Simons. That's the one you didn't know. That's a senior residence now on the corner of Girard and NDG. And then it closed. It closed. We were the last class. Then I went to West Hill, which we were the first class.
That was high school already. How did you fit in to high school?
I didn't. I hated it. Oh my God. Until I was about 15 when I met somebody. And
What was it that you hated about it, or why did you hate it?
I couldn't stand those kids. Bunch of spoiled Jewish kids. I've never been exposed to that. I was also bullied, of course, because my mother didn't have clothes to buy me new clothes here, so I wore whatever I had here. I was bullied because of that. Look at the shoes she's wearing. And then when I found my boyfriend, who was 11 years older than I was, I used to go in. I said, you know where I was last night? I was at the Shapery. You know what the Shapery is? No, you don't. It's a nightclub. Very expensive nightclub. Or I was here, I was there. They looked at him, how come? Then he used to pick me up. I asked him to pick me up at school by car. And I rubbed it in big time. That was my revenge.
Did you make friends in that school?
No.
Not at all. How about outside school?
I had this whole community of people that I met through my boyfriend.
Who was Canadian?
No, they were none of them. They were mostly Romanian.
Also Jewish?
Yeah.
Was that important?
What?
Was that important that he should be Jewish?
No. For me, no.
And for
But they happen to be Jews, so what am I going to do? Ask them to convert?
What was the most, if you think back of all your experiences, you said it was difficult. What were the most difficult points in your settling here in Montreal?
The high school. I got along better with all those rich kids at the private school. But I knew I couldn't keep it up with them because it was a different... I mean, I never belonged to that type of world. I mean, my parents didn't have diamond mines in Africa. So... But there I made some friends, but they all went home. Like, wherever they were coming from, they went home. And, you know, I couldn't even dream about going to Africa. We went to Africa, but not at that time. So, then I got into this Westhill that I hated. My God, did I hate it. And then also something else happened at Westhill. I was in grade 8. And the principal called my mother in that I have something wrong with my brain. I should go to special school. My mother told him, said, do you know that she doesn't speak the language? And he was very, oh, now I understand.
That was,
Mr.
I guess,
Answorth, yes.
that was at the very beginning, right? When you just started there.
And after that, I hated it. God, did I hate going there. I went because I knew that I wanted to go to university. I wanted to become a doctor, which I didn't know how expensive it is. But I knew I had a goal. Get out of here and go to university.
Did you have, you or your family, your mother and your grandparents, have anything to do or any connections to the Jewish community here? Belonging
Not
to
after
synagogue?
the experience at the Jewish General Hospital. I wouldn't have any. And then, do you know that my grandfather is in a pauper's cemetery? Because Paperman said if he cannot pay, I don't know how much it was, he goes to a pauper's cemetery. And when my grandmother died, that was her wish, to be buried with my grandfather. And the cemetery said no, because you're not a pauper anymore. And, you know, I mean, too many things happened. And when my grandmother got stuck with the $5,000 bill, and my mother went to jail, nothing. We didn't even get, what? Used sunglasses. Nothing. That turned me completely. And then I saw these rich Jewish kids at Westhill. I said, oh my God, I don't want anything to do with that society. And I didn't. I really didn't.
Where did you go to university?
Concordia,
Concordia. And what did you study?
psychology.
It was called Sir Williams at the time, right?
What?
It was still called Sir Williams.
Yes,
at the
of
time.
course.
Yeah.
I had a wonderful time there. Oh, it was great. But again, I had mostly European. Many of them were Jewish students. This was my crowd. I felt great. And we all agreed about Christianity and Judaism and all that. And we all hated these rich Jewish kids from God said, look.
So basically, your social circle became other immigrants. Yeah. How did you...
Immigrants, yes. Sure, I married an immigrant too.
How did you meet your husband?
On a bus. Okay, you want to hear the real story? What happened? I was studying for my final exam in history. The history exam was on Monday. Saturday afternoon, my friend called me that there's a very nice boy coming from Toronto. Would you like to meet? I said, listen, I cannot meet anybody. I didn't study. I was too busy all year. I have to study for my history because I have to graduate. I want to go to university. I mean, that I knew. Anyway, half an hour later, I thought, which is more important, Napoleon or my life? And I decided my life. The hell with this Napoleon business. So I phoned my friend that I can come. I first phoned my mother in New York whether I can go, because she always wanted to meet the boys I go out with. Said, sure, but I said, she's not coming here, and even my grandmother was living with her, cannot me. I said, but, said to me, I trust Cecile and Alex, who introduced us. Okay, so I could go. Anyway, by that time I phoned back Cecile, and I said, listen, I'm going. I said, the hell with Napoleon or whoever I was studying. And I'm going. They said, it's too late, but you can meet us at the bus stop. So we met at the 65 streetcar on the corner of Van Horn. No, not Van Horn. Yeah, it is Van Horn and Queen Mary. Somebody told me, said to me, that's where you should put Richard's ashes, where you met.
What's his name?
Richard Lubelski.
And what was his background? Where was he from?
He was from Poland, but we came from very similar backgrounds. His father was a doctor, his grandfather was a doctor. And we came from, they were quite well to do. And that was his background.
How did they survive the war?
In Russia. Because, again, Siberia. I know, it's Siberia. Because his father was a doctor, and the Russians needed doctors. So they got all the doctors out and their families, and they took them to Siberia. And my father-in-law was practicing there. So and they stayed in Siberia, so he never concentrated or anything like that. His mother's brother was killed in a concentration, and her parents.
When did you get married? What year?
1960.
1960. Did you have a synagogue wedding?
No. Yes. We went to Temple Emmanuel.
Whose wish was that?
Richard and I. We went to a Temple Emmanuel and we talked to Rabbi Stern. I loved Rabbi Stern. And as a matter of fact, one of the reasons we went to Temple is because I met a friend here who was Canadian, by the way, who said to me, listen, you may like Temple if you come to it. She said to me, it's Reformed, it's almost like Christian, you may like it. And I liked it. So that was my first introduction to Judaism. Oh.
Is it still okay? The mic?
I think so.
Okay.
That was my first introduction to Judaism. And I remembered that. I said, you know, Richard, that's a good place to go. Why don't we get married there? He said to me, why don't we go just down to the city hall? I said, nah, I want to go to Temple. So we ended up at Temple in the office. I mean, no big wedding or anything.
How religious was his family from before the war?
No.
And once you got together, you married in a synagogue. Did you observe anything in your life with the children?
No. When the children were born and when they got older, Richard and I discussed it. And you see, Richard didn't have the same background as I did with the Christianity and this and that and the third thing. I said, you know what? I don't want the children to be as confused as I was. I said, changing religion on a weekly basis. I said, let's take them to Temple. My oldest son came home and he said, oh, you want me to have a bar mitzvah? I know where I want to have a bar mitzvah. I said, great, where? The ultra-Orthodox synagogue on Court St. Luke. And he said to me, I said, you know, I want to see it. But I didn't know what kind of synagogue. By the way, I didn't have any idea. When I had to sit next to God up there by myself, I said, Ian, you want to have a bar mitzvah? I'm not coming to this one. And I was very lucky because the following week, there was a concert for youth at Temple. And Ian loved it with the guitar and the music and the folk song. And he said, that's a good idea. I'm going to come here. And I said, God, you're listening to me.
How about Chad? Did he have his bar mitzvah at the temple too?
Yes. Oh, yeah, both of them. They both finished. Once my children start something, they have to finish it.
Where did they go to school? Did you think of putting them into Jewish school?
Are you kidding? Sorry. Reacting, no. I would never put them into a Jewish school.
How about observing anything at home? Shabbat, candles, Shabbat dinner.
The only thing I used to do was Passover dinners. And one of the reasons I did it, because used to do it with 25 to 30 people.
Who were these 25, 30 people?
All their friends. So I introduced Judaism to all their Christian friends. My son, both of them, moved in. My son, Chad, is the godfather to one of his friends. And she waited to have the ceremony until Chad got well. He was sick at the time. So my children followed in their parents' footsteps because my husband was the same.
When you did Seder at home, would you invite your mother?
Of course.
So it was also a family affair.
Of course, and my in-laws and whoever was around was invited.
Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah, Hanukkah, any of those?
Not
holidays?
Hanukkah. Hanukkah I did once in a while because it was close to Christmas, so I figured, okay, because I used to have a Christmas tree when the kids were small. Oh, I used to have a Christmas tree when the kids were small.
Did you have a Christmas tree growing up?
Yes, every year. Even in 1944, I had 3 Christmas trees.
And what was the story of having a Christmas tree in a not religious Jewish home?
Not religious. Everybody else had a Christmas tree, so I had a Christmas tree. And the other thing that we always celebrated was Mikulash. That doesn't exist here.
Yeah, Santa Claus, yeah.
No, Mikulash was not Santa Claus. I don't know how to translate Mikulash.
That's the closest translation I can give you.
Yeah, that's a closer, but it's not. But I explained it to my kids, what it is. Because I actually did it one year. put red paper all over the walls. They looked at me like, this person is going nuts here.
In marrying your husband, was it important to you that he was Jewish, or was it important to you that he was also an immigrant?
No, neither. What was important to me, that he came from a middle-class family with a similar cultural background.
And was the war something you talked about with each other? Was that a
No,
topic
it
of
was just
conversation?
understood. We never discussed it, no.
It was what? Sorry?
It was understood.
No discussion. How about telling your children, both of you, your war stories? When would you tell? Would you talk about your life during the war and what happened to you, to your children?
Both my children know that I was converted. My husband never was.
No, but what happened to you? Like, you know, the hiding.
No, I very
and,
rarely talk about it.
and you never talked about it with them?
No, I didn't say never, once in a while. But most of the time they...
Were there occasions, or what? On what occasions would this be a topic
In
of
Budapest,
conversation?
when we were in Budapest. I went back to my old apartment, went back to the high school, to the dark there. We went down the Danube, and I told them about that. Then we went to the Dohány utcai templom. And then I tried to look up Páva utcai templom, where my grandparents belonged. And there's nothing there.
Well, it's just the Holocaust Museum.
What?
It's the Holocaust Museum.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I think I added a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so too. Thank you very
I don't know
much.
what else to say, except that I always have a sort of guilt feeling if I listen to some horror stories, what happened in Auschwitz, Dachau. My father-in-law, I had two father-in-laws, by the way, and I had two mother-in-laws. No, don't do that. I don't want that.
Okay,
No.
so then,
Well, let's just wrap it up then.
no, but then we'll finish. So thank you
Okay.
very much. Thank you very
And,
much. Wait, because then we'll stop. Okay, you want to stop now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so thank you very much.